Chapter 25. Under the Influence. Lamont had been sitting on his bed for over 2 hours, listening to Mimi talk and talk and talk. "Monty, do you really think I'm beautiful? Do you really think I have it? Do you really think—" Jordan had driven Anne Brown home in Anne's Mercedes, with Nate following in his car to bring Jordan back. Lamont planned on calling Anne tomorrow to apologize profusely and convince her it was best not to tell Bradley what had happened. He'd already asked Imani to figure out what kind of gift to send. "Yes, Mimi." Lamont cut her off, fearing she might go on with this "do you really think" thing for hours. Witnessing her behavior on X convinced him to never do it. He cringed at the idea of vomiting personal information the way Mimi was right now. But it was illuminating. Everything he might want to know about her was coming to the surface. "I love Fat E," she swooned. "He's the best. He let me write my whole part of our song, even though Daryl said it sucked. I've written a lot of songs, you know. I have a notebook." Yes, he'd seen the notebook. But what was she saying about the Fat E song? Wait a second. You wrote the chorus? Daryl had not mentioned that. Lamont thought he should give some X to Daryl as a truth serum so he could find out what else that dwarf was doing behind his back. "I just did it over and over again until Daryl said it was okay. Was it okay? Was it?" "Yes, Mimi," Lamont interrupted. "It's a big hit. You should be very proud." He put his face in his hands. He was never going to get to bed. Mimi told him about her ex-boyfriend, Jamal, who had gone to Georgia State on a football scholarship and immediately started dating someone else. No surprise there, Lamont thought. She'd gotten pregnant when he came home on a college break. "When I called and told him, he told me to have an abortion," she said. Again, not a surprise. "And I told him we were both responsible," she said. "And you know what he said to me?" Lamont had a feeling the word "what" would open the floodgates of emotion, but he couldn't help asking. "Jamal said, 'If that's how you see it.'" Then she started sobbing, which confused Lamont because wasn't ecstasy supposed to keep you blissfully happy for the duration of the trip? He hated it when women cried. He massaged his temples. "He told me he loved me. I didn't even want to have the baby, but how could he have said that to me? I had the abortion, but I only told Toya. He wouldn't even pay for it. He didn't even care. He said he had another girlfriend. Well, then why did he sleep with me when he came home?" Lamont was forced to console her, thinking the whole time, this is not how I plan to spend my holiday. Now she was admitting to sleeping with another guy. "I didn't even like Floyd. He was a real player. Everyone called him Fuck 'em and Flee Floyd." Ha! Lamont thought upon hearing the name. That was a good one. Mimi pouted and slapped him on the arm when she caught him laughing under his breath. "Floyd told everyone, but I denied it," she said shamefully. "I never let on to anyone it was true." "So this was after that cat Jamal dumped you?" Lamont said, oblivious to his insensitivity. "No," she said defensively. "It was when Jamal first went away to Georgia State." Lamont frowned. "So you cheated on him first?" She leaned over and started slapping him on the back. "I was drunk. It didn't count. I was drunk. It didn't count." "Get off me," he said, while thinking, if you were my girlfriend and I found out, it would have counted. Being drunk doesn't excuse everything, girl. Know your limit and keep your fucking legs closed. "Do you think I'm awful?" Mimi whimpered, falling back against the pillows. "Of course not. That guy took advantage of you," Lamont said, feeling very put upon. "You've only slept with 2 people?" The intimacy of this situation was making him uncomfortable. To lighten the mood, he cracked, "Lena probably fucked 2 guys last week." "So you think Lena's a slut?" "No," he responded quickly. "I didn't say that." See, this conversation was getting him in trouble. She was the one on drugs, but he was still getting caught out there. "What Lena does is her business. I'm just saying, don't worry about it." "So you don't think I'm a bad girl?" she purred. Jordan had cleaned her up after her romp in the cornfield, and Mimi was now wearing Jordan's long white nightgown. It was damn near sheer. "Ooh, why don't you show me how bad you can be, little mama?" Lamont thought. She was turning him on. He could see those tiny but inviting breasts through the nightie, but he couldn't do anything with her. She worked for him. He rubbed the crotch of his sweatpants, hoping she didn't notice his growing hard-on. The way she was acting, she might grab it, and he never liked to start anything he couldn't finish. But no, he wasn't going to touch her. She was on drugs. She'd be screaming rape tomorrow, and he wouldn't blame her if she did. Nailing her now would make him no different from Fuck'em and Flea Floyd. As much as he'd love to give it to her, it would be wrong any which way you looked at it. She was an artist on his label, and he never liked to mix business with sex. He wouldn't just be able to get rid of her afterward like other women. If he wasn't going to have a relationship with her, it would turn into a pain once she started catching feelings, which he was certain she would do if he put it on her, as only he could. And surprisingly, he had a protective feeling toward her. He would try to get her to go to sleep, and that was all. But with all this bad girl talk, it was going to be difficult. He went down to the kitchen to take a breather for a minute and to get another bottle of Dasani. Nate had said to keep her hydrated, and Mimi was gulping water down like a marathon runner. When he returned, she was standing in front of the toilet in his bathroom with the door wide open, nightgown up and panties down, wiping herself. He involuntarily turned his head. Christ, she was rocking a down-below baldy. He wouldn't have pegged her for that. He rubbed his crotch again and walked back to the bed. When Mimi came out, she looked down at his frantically tapping foot and said, "What's wrong with your feet?" Indignantly, "Nothing." "One of your toenails is black." "I jammed it playing basketball." She bent down and started stroking his foot. "Your feet are so ugly," she squealed. Lamont pulled his foot away. "No, they're not." "Yeah, they are." She wrinkled her nose. "They're crusty." "Shut up." He went to the drawer to get some socks. Mimi rolled all over the bed, laughing hysterically. "Those are the ugliest feet I have ever seen," she screamed into the pillow. He came back and sat on the bed. "Leave my feet alone." She tried to stifle her laughter. "Do you get manicures?" Vanessa told her he did. His hands were beautiful, well moisturized, and his nails always had a clear sheen. "Yeah," he said sheepishly. "So why don't you get pedicures too, instead of walking around with those nasty feet?" She rolled around on the bed and howled. "Everyone sees your hands," he said sharply. "I'm not going to put a Bulgari ring on an ungroomed hand." "But you'll put those ugly-ass feet into your $400 shoes?" "Pedicures are gay," he retorted. "And manicures aren't?" "It's a fine line." That really set her off. She was howling so loud he thought the neighbors a cornfield over might come knocking. "Ha, ha, ha," Lamont drawled sarcastically. He knew she wasn't in her right state of mind, but an insult was still an insult. Were his feet that bad? All of a sudden she was right behind him, her arms around his neck. "I'm sorry," she baby-talked. "Did I hurt your feelings?" He tried to shake her off. "My feelings don't get hurt." "I don't care if your feet are crusty and ugly," she said. "You're still a beautiful person on the inside." "You think so?" he said, wondering if she'd say that tomorrow when she wasn't feeling so damn ecstatic. She slipped her arms around his waist and rubbed herself against his back. On the bare spot between his t-shirt and his drooping sweatpants, right above the crack of his ass, he could feel the wet spot seeping through her thong. Was she aroused? By him? "Yes, Lamont," she hummed. "You're the best." Lamont found himself in a compromising and arousing position. To fuck or not to fuck? That was the question. Hey, maybe she really did like him. He glanced around and saw that her eyes were closed and her face was smashed up into his shoulder. So he pushed down the elastic waist of his sweats. He had no underwear on, and began to openly stroke himself. "You want me to kiss?" And she mumbled something unintelligible into his neck. Then she sucked. Oh shit, that was his spot. He felt a tingle of arousal surge from the soles of his ugly feet to the tips of his graying hair. "Do you want me to?" She whispered again, lapping on his spot. He thought she'd mumbled, "Kiss it," and he wanted to say, "Yes." He hunched over and stroked faster. "Do you?" she said, between nibbles. "What?" "Want me to kiss them?" Them? If she was talking balls now, it was over. "Kiss what?" "Your feet." Not what he had in mind, but he snapped his sweats back up and said, "Sure." She scrambled around and plopped down on his lap. She grabbed his pudgy cheeks and gushed, "Monty, I love you." "Do you?" He found himself cooing back as he hugged her. He wasn't drunk or high, but it was like the effects of the X were seeping into him through osmosis. "How much do you love me, baby?" "So much," she purred, all loopy. She crushed herself into his chest. "Please don't ever leave me." "Never, baby," he whispered back, taking great pleasure in being the temporary object of her affection. He couldn't resist pressing his boner up between her legs. It took every ounce of self-control he had to not push that thong a little to one side, slip himself out of his sweats, and go in for the kill. "I'm always here for you, precious." "Everyone leaves me." She breathed directly into his ear. "My father, Jamal." "Just give it to her," Lamont told himself. "She wants it. She needs it. Stop being so selfish, man." "Monty," she purred, detecting Lamont's stiffness between her legs and wiggling on it. "Yeah," Lamont moaned softly. She pressed her hand on top of his bulging sweats and chirped, "Oh, you love me too." A hard dick does not equal love, he thought. But right now, honey, I sure like you a hell of a lot. "Do you like it when girls get that half Brazilian?" "Mm-hmm," he hummed enthusiastically. "Vanessa said guys love it. You don't think it looks weird?" She stood up, took 2 steps back, and yanked her nightgown up. "Give me your honest opinion, okay?" Before she could expose herself, Lamont closed his eyes, frantically waved his hands, and screamed, "No!" Like he was a vampire and her Brazilian waxed pussy was a cross. With her thumb inside the top of her thong, ready to flash, she said, "I just want you to tell me if you think it's sexy." "I do," he wailed, thinking, "I just saw it and it's sexy as hell. I do. I know what it looks like." She bent over and kissed him softly on his closed eyelids, then on his forehead and both sides of his face. Lamont opened his eyes and looked up at her as she batted her long eyelashes. "Show me how much you love me," she pleaded tenderly. Lamont was ready to throw in the towel and give her what she wanted. How long does it take to get blue balls? He wondered. He wouldn't know. He'd never been denied sex. "What happened to you kissing my feet, hon?" he said to distract her. He didn't know how much longer he could keep her at bay. She dropped to the floor and slipped off one of his socks. She kissed the top of his right foot. She looked up at him. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, saying you had nasty feet and all." He shook his left foot. "Don't forget the other one." Kneeling on the floor, she pulled off his other sock and kissed his left foot. He slipped his hand inside his sweats and stroked. He was just about to say, "Come here, sweetheart, let me show you something," when there was a soft knock at the door. He swiftly kicked Mimi back and barked, "Come in." Jordan stuck her head in. She'd heard the screaming while she was sexing Nate in their room, so she'd pushed him off to come down here and investigate. Not that she hadn't heard women screaming in Lamont's bedroom before. The best thing about this summer house was that the second largest bedroom was all the way at the other end of the floor, far from Lamont's. She had no desire to be kept awake all night listening to Lamont slap some girl's ass. She couldn't speak for Nate. Jordan saw Mimi crouched down on the floor, laughing hysterically, with the nightgown bunched up around her waist and her thong barely covering what needed to be covered. "What's going on in here?" "Look at her," Lamont said. "She's a mess. She won't stop laughing." Mimi crawled over and scaled Jordan's athletic body. Lamont was glad she had Jordan's full attention. If Jordan saw his dick tenting up his sweats, she would jump to conclusions. He smoothly pulled the duvet over himself. "Jordan, Jordan," Mimi wheezed, kissing her on the cheek. "Where have you been? I missed you. Come in, let's talk. You know Sister Girl is my favorite magazine." As she tried to pry Mimi's arms from around her neck, Jordan looked at Lamont, and they both shook their heads. "Great," she said. She walked Mimi back to the bed. It was already past 4 a.m., and she wanted everyone in the house, mostly herself, to go to sleep. But she knew that letting Mimi go to sleep in a bed with Lamont was trouble waiting to happen. "Are we okay in here?" Jordan questioned, looking directly at Lamont. "Yes, we are," he declared, staring her down. "Why don't you go sleep in the extra room downstairs?" "This is my room," Lamont fumed. "You trying to kick me out of my own room? I pay the bills up in here." That was so like Jordan not to give him the benefit of the doubt. Lamont saw her as one of those irritating feminist types, always trying to make everything seem like the man's fault. They'd found a way to get along for Nate's sake, and now that Jordan had, at 28, moved up to second in command at Sister Girl and become a more influential member of the media, Lamont had more reason to be friendly with her. As Jordan gave him her patented "I'm on to you" look, Lamont wondered for the 100th time, how can Nate think he's in love with her? Here he was, alone and erect, with this 20-year-old hottie who wanted to fuck his brains out, and all he was doing was keeping her hydrated. Well, he was making a valiant effort, and for that alone, he should be applauded. "What kind of person do you think I am?" he said, almost hurt. He silently added, "Bitch," but he could only imagine what Jordan might do if he called her out like that. She was a graduate of Brown University, and had a graduate degree in journalism from some other uppity school, but she wasn't above slapping a nigga. Even him. "Tell me, what kind of person are you?" she challenged. "Wait, are you guys getting into a fight?" Mimi murmured, grabbing both of their hands. "Let's just all be friends, okay?" That broke the tension. Lamont and Jordan both laughed. "Come on, Mimi," Jordan ordered. "I'm going to put you to bed, downstairs." "Are there even sheets on that bed?" Lamont asked, suddenly feeling a little upset that she was taking Mimi away. He remembered Anne lying on just a mattress cover. "We have sheets in the closet," Jordan said, pulling Mimi toward the door. I know you don't stoop so low as to make your own bed, LL Cool J, she smirked, knowing he hated being called that. But I can handle it. Lamont pulled Mimi's arm back toward him. This was none of Jordan's business. She hadn't even known Mimi until tonight, and now she was getting all Mother Teresa and treating him like he was some kind of child molester. Jordy, he said, knowing she hated that childish nickname. Go to bed. She's not about to go to sleep yet, and she'll wind up right back in that cornfield. He softened a bit, knowing that was the only way to get rid of Nate's ball and chain. I'll stay up with her. He forced a smile. Jordan gave him a final warning look, said goodnight to Mimi, and left, wondering what had gotten into Lamont. Was he turning into a decent person in his old age?
This ends Side 2 of Cassette 5 of Bling.
As soon as the coast was clear, Lamont went down to the kitchen with his cell to make 2 calls. The first was to Carlos. When Lamont went to the Hamptons, he liked to drive himself out. He had all these cars, but he never got to drive them. He usually came out around 3 in the morning on Thursday when there was no traffic, and took business calls by the pool on Friday. This weekend, he'd tooled out in his 2004 Ferrari 360 Modena Spider, titanium with a blue leather interior. But now he called Carlos to inform the driver that his weekend off was over. The second call was to Kendra. Lamont told her about Grimey's stunt, exaggerated about how stressful it had all been on him, and told her Carlos was on his way to her apartment to pick her up. Until daybreak, Mimi begged him to give it to her, or, as she kept saying, "Show me how much you love me." Her bizarre phraseology gave him the creeps. He hoped it was the ex that was making her so mushy, because if that was how she thought of sex in her normal state, she had some serious issues. He finally told her he couldn't love her because he didn't have his Viagra. A joke, obviously. She began to let out a piercing howl, and he put a pillow over her face until she promised to keep quiet. As they lay next to each other on the bed, she writhed against his back and told him what a fabulous, handsome, and all-around swell guy he was. He stayed erect the entire time, and almost came as much from the praise as her constant rubbing. When she finally fell asleep, he turned over and stared at her for a while, wondering if she had meant any of the sweet things she'd said to him. Probably not. He cuddled up to her until 8:45 when the sound of wheels crunching gravel outside alerted him to the arrival of Carlos and Kendra. He made sure Mimi was all covered and went down to let them in. Carlos quickly passed out on the sofa, and without delay, Lamont dragged Kendra up to his bathroom, and after about 30 seconds of foreplay, on him, roughly fucked her on the edge of the bathtub while Mimi snored in his bed. All things considered, Kendra could not have been happier.